Face the ultimate engineering challenge. Save the magnificent city of Venice before it's drowned by the sea.
What we're doing here is something that has not been done before.
It's a war on all fronts, where mere centimeters spell danger.
You can kill someone.
A project so ambitious, there's no guarantee they can pull it off.
It's a very big idea, it's not easy.
There is some problem on the track.
21st century technology versus the powerful forces of nature.
We have to do this job and we have to try to do it as quickly as possible.
A high-stakes vision to head off catastrophe. Venice, Italy, 1,500 years old. One of the great historic cities, filled with priceless artwork and incredible architecture. One of the most beautiful places in all the world. Built in the middle of a lagoon just off the Adriatic Sea, Venice is actually 118 little islands connected by 400 footbridges. Venetians are never far from water. They depend on this major artery, the famous Grand Canal, which winds through the city for 4 kilometers. But the waters which surround Venice are both its charm and the curse. For over 100 years, extreme high tides have threatened this city. In 1966, a catastrophic flood submerged Venice for 24 hours. Ever since that date, the people have lived in fear. Up to 100 smaller floods hit the city every year. The worst was 2002, when a series of 15 high tides swamped Venice over a 3-week period. It's a dire emergency. The Adriatic Sea threatens to bury Venice in a watery grave. Now, in a race against time, a fantastic plan to save the city is taking shape. It's called MOSA, named after Moses. According to the Bible, he miraculously parted the Red Sea and created dry ground. In the modern vision, the MOSA project will hold back the sea and save Venice from drowning. This is the woman who has to pull it all together. Engineer Dr. Maria Teresa Broto. She's the Megabuilder in charge of the $5.5 billion rescue project, financed by the Italian government. The project is ambitious, and so is Maria Teresa. She's a powerhouse female boss in a macho culture.
And this is a little strange for Italy, but I think this is our future. Why not? The future could be pink.
The job is so huge that Maria Teresa oversees a giant consortium of engineering firms with 1,500 employees.
This is one of the biggest projects under construction in the world at the moment, and perhaps I think I can tell you this is the most innovative one.
Maria Teresa and her team are building 78 giant floodgates that will lie flat on the bottom of the seabed, filled with water. At the first warning of a dangerous high tide, engineers will quickly pump air into them. Then, the 18 to 29 meter tall barriers will rise up on their hinges and hold back the sea. When the water subsides, they will lie back down again on the bottom of the sea. It will be an amazing solution. But before they can even build the gates, engineers have to prepare the seabed to hold them. The gates will be installed at 3 separate entrances to the Venice lagoon. That's where the giant work sites have been created. They're called Lido, Malamocco, and Chioggia. Today, Maria Teresa is doing a site check at Lido.
Andiamo a vedere la Tura, entriamo?
The showpiece here is this giant man-made basin called the Tura.
It's very impressive here. It's so huge, more than 500 meters long and 100 meters wide, and minus 9 meters below medium sea level.
Dredged out of the sea bottom, the Tura is where they'll eventually construct giant concrete caissons, 20,000-ton building blocks, which will anchor the floodgates to the bottom of the sea. The Tura is like a dry dock. After the caissons are built, the Tura will be flooded and the caissons floated out.
Queste piastre metterà lo stacco dei cassoni nel momento in cui saranno tutti quanti completati.
Maria Teresa is getting a status report from Giulio Del Poli, Lido's director of works.
Abbiamo avuto dei problemi di quota, di mantenere la quota e scalpellato. Passa una settimana.
Ma possiamo recuperare il tempo perso o...
Sì, stiamo recuperando proprio avendo aumentato la quantità di personale che ci lavora attorno.
Overall, Maria Teresa is happy with the work at Lido.
Congratulations, very good work you did here.
It's lucky she isn't heading over to the second site, Malamocco. Here, most of the work is going on underwater. The channel is 27 meters deep. You could sink a 9-story building here. Sergio Gentili and his crew are dredging the sea bottom and building up trenches for the floodgates. They need to stabilize the trenches with sheet piling, a series of steel panels with interlocking connections driven into the clay bottom to form a watertight barrier. It's no easy feat. Sheet piles weigh 12 tons each and have to be precisely maneuvered into the seabed. They're fighting the wind, the tide, and the currents.
Nel momento in cui il vento è forte come quello che c'è oggi, rischieremmo che il pezzo iniziasse a girare su se stesso e diventerebbe poco sicuro.
The crew must work around huge freighters on their way to the Venice harbor. Sergio has to install 270 couples of sheet piles, but his team has only been able to complete 8 to 10 a day.
Oggi purtroppo non possiamo continuare con l'infissione perché, come ho detto prima, sarebbe veramente rischioso per la sicurezza.
Safety first. Sergio takes the delay in stride.
Siamo a Venezia. Le condizioni climatiche sono abbastanza difficili.
But they can't afford to fall behind. The next day, out on the sheet piling barge, the winds have died down. But now, Sergio and his team have a new issue to deal with. Time.
Dobbiamo spostarci un attimo, vai.
The current is getting stronger, and they have only 15 minutes to maneuver the sheet piling before the current pushes it out of position. Venice wasn't built in a day, but that's all the time it could take to cause major destruction. Famous tourist sites like St. Mark's Square are under constant threat from floodwaters. And workers on the Mosa project know they face a looming deadline. A monster flood could hit the city at any time. Mosa is an ambitious project spread out over 3 work sites: Lido, Malamocco, and Chioggia. Construction crews will eventually install 78 giant barrier gates that can rise from the sea and hold back dangerous high tides. But smaller battles are fought every day. Although canals are the lifeblood of Venice, when the daily tides rush in, these arteries get clogged with mud. When they wash out, they carry away bits of stone and mortar. It's this guy's job to fix all the trouble spots. Engineer Giuliano Molan. He works for Insula, a government agency with the never-ending task of repairing the infrastructure. But Venice is crumbling faster than he can restore it.
Vedete queste fessure che ci sono fra pietra e pietra che consentono all'acqua di penetrare completamente oltre il muro e quindi di corrodere e di asportare tutto il terreno che c'è al di là, creando anche delle voragini sotto le fondazioni delle case e favorendo il crollo delle case.
Hundreds of canals like this one need to be drained, cleaned, and the walls repaired. Giuliano's workers are replacing the ancient wooden pilings that have done a miraculous job of holding up Venice for hundreds of years. But it's an ongoing battle to keep them from rotting away. And these small heroic efforts can't hold back the floodwaters. Everything depends on the Mosa project. At the Malamocco worksite, Sergio Gentili and his crew are up for the fight, but they need to hurry. They have to get these metal sheet piles in place to reinforce the seabed, where the floodgates will eventually lie. But they have only 15 minutes left before the current speeds up and becomes their enemy. And the site supervisor has just turned up for a surprise visit. Mr. Bacini is the overseer who makes sure all construction is running on time and is up to par. If he's not happy with the work, nobody gets paid.
Delicate operation in which they have to lock the sheet piling to the other 2 piles.
Their 15 minutes is nearly up, and the current is almost at full force. But this is no time to get sloppy.
Yes, it's rather difficult because it is necessary to have perfect verticality.
Now the current is at full force. There's a real element of risk, but a diver must go down and check the entire length of the beam to make sure it's in exactly the right position.
Se non si è ben posizionata la trave bisogna comunque salparla, quindi tirarla su di nuovo e rinfiggerla in modo che da ripristinare la condizione ideale. Okay. Sì, è un gran problema farlo.
So far, so good. But has all this hard work impressed the supervisor, Mr. Bacini? Success. The crew can breathe easier. Looks as if those paychecks, just like today's maneuvers, will be on time. Keeping Venice dry is a struggle of epic proportions. Here's a guy who's up to the challenge. Franco Damiani, engineer. He's director of works at the Malamaco site. Franco moved to Venice 14 years ago.
Sono veneziano di adozione, però io cerco di fare sempre bene tutti i miei lavori, dovunque vado.
Franco's laid back, but just ask him how he feels about the threat to Venice.
Cosa succederebbe se il mondo perdesse Venezia? Basta fare un giro in città, fare il turista 3-4 giorni, poi ognuno si risponde da solo, è una città non replicabile. No, a Venezia non si fa.
Franco and his crew are preparing the seabed for the giant floodgates. They're working on either side of the trenches where the concrete caissons that hold the gates will be installed. It's their task to make sure the ground won't erode every time the gates swing into action. Engineers have come up with a high-tech solution they're rolling out from this barge. You wouldn't want to sleep on it, but this one-of-a-kind mattress will be laid out along the seafloor to prevent that erosion. First, Franco's guys roll out sheets of geocomposite material, reinforced with a double-twist steel wire mesh. It's protected with an alloy and plastic coating. Workers heat weld it together. Next, a layer of gravel is poured out and pressed across the bottom. Then, the crew places a special geotextile cover on top, connected by a series of screws and plastic support elements. It's monotonous work, but these guys can't afford to get sloppy. This baby needs to come with a guarantee. It must survive 100 years of pounding waves on the sea bottom. Finally, the mattress is wound around a giant drum. On Monday morning, a pontoon will carry the mattress over to this GPS launching barge. When it's time for installation, the barge's onboard satellite system will allow a pilot to guide the mattress into position on the sea bottom. Now it's early Monday morning, and Franco is ready to go, but he has only his shadow to keep him company. The job site is deserted. Franco's workers have to travel here by boat, and only a handful made it to the job site. A nationwide strike has paralyzed Italy's entire transportation system. Many of these commuters had to walk several kilometers to get to work. Many more are stranded, waiting for water buses that will never arrive. This is the last thing Franco needs.
Oggi ci condiziona sull'esecuzione di un grosso oggetto subacqueo per il quale abbiamo bisogno di una pompa che viene da terraferma.
The strike is delaying the entire Mosa project, and it's almost time for the annual Venetian summer vacation. Venice is in as much danger as ever, but every job site is about to be shut down for 2 weeks. Storm clouds over Venice. If nature decides to whip up a heavy rainfall during a high tide, it's a recipe for disaster. Residents of this magnificent city have to cope with minor flooding several times a year, and the very real threat of destruction during a monster storm surge. What else can they do when their only hope of survival is the Mosa, a mega project so ambitious that it will take, at this point in construction, another 5 years to complete. architect Alberto Albertini can't afford to wait for the Mosa gates to be built. He has to find another way to rescue one of Venice's most important heritage buildings. 16th century Palazzo Paoli.
C'è necessità di grande delicatezza, di grande amore, di grande passione, di grande attenzione, perché tutto questo che voi vedete, non si può rovinare.
Alberto and his restoration team have a unique plan to keep out floodwaters.
Cerchiamo di costruire una vasca che permetta all'edificio di non risentire dell'alta marea.
The tank is like a concrete box that will stop high tides from entering the building. Some columns and this staircase actually had to be hoisted in the air so the tank could be moved underneath. For Alberto, this project is a labor of love.
Bisogna avere passione, bisogna amare questa città fino in fondo e fare qualcosa perché questa città rimanga viva.
Meanwhile, at the Mosa Project's Malamocco site, things are looking up for Franco Damiani. The transit strike was short-lived. 1 day of lost labor. But now, he's got to hope that the rain holds off. Franco's team is moving ahead with plans to lay the geotextile mattress on the seabed. First, workers have to attach the giant drum that holds the mattress onto a pontoon boat. If it's not fitted just right, the mattress won't roll off smoothly, so these guys take a lot of pride in their work. Finally, the mattress is attached, and they can float it over to the GPS barge. Awaiting the hookup, GPS barge pilot Marco Tadia. He'll perform the delicate maneuver to roll out and position the mattress on the seabed. It's a job that requires absolute precision.
I take every time that I open because it's a second for do something of wrong and we can destroy some part of the boat. It's not good and making damage to some people and also this is not good.
The maneuver can only be pulled off in the brief window of time when the tide is turning.
Ogni 6 ore la marea entra e ogni 6 ore esce. Nel momento in cui c'è l'inversione della marea, le correnti sono quasi ferme e si fa questa operazione in maniera rapida.
Despite the time pressure, everyone has to sit tight while Marco lowers the mattress 18 meters down to the seabed.
Sono i poveri granchi che da un momento all'altro si vedono sulla testa, tac, e rimangono sotto. Come vengono
sono più veloci del materasso.
It's a waiting game. There's more waiting around over at the third Mosa worksite called Chioggia. Construction is much further behind here than at Lido or Malamocco. Excavators and plows are still dredging out the basin, called a tura, where they'll build the giant concrete caissons to hold the floodgates. When it's finished, it will look like the tura that's already built at the Lido site. Chioggia is an essential entry point for the lagoon, where the fishing fleet comes into Venice's harbor, and that's also where the clock is ticking for engineer Sergio Malati. Sergio has only 15 months to reinforce the seabed here so it can support the concrete caissons and floodgates. His crew will get the job done with huge metal piles rammed into the clay sea bottom to keep it from shifting.
We are going to put down 1,552 piles. I know each of them by name and I dream them in the night.
To meet their quota, Sergio's crew has brought in a 67-meter long crane. one of the tallest in all of the Mediterranean. But there's a big problem. Sergio's monster crane is broken. The pile driver ran amok, destroying a vital attachment in the machinery. Now, with only 85 piles completed, Sergio has to wait for a replacement part that can handle the soft clay seabed.
Prima veramente torniamo tranquilli.
The lack of progress is causing him nightmares.
Sleep okay?
Not at all. I'd like to start again.
Sergio is already 2 weeks behind schedule. He doesn't know if the crane will be fixed in a matter of days, weeks, or months. Back on the GPS barge at the Malamaco job site, Marco is finally ready to lay out the mattress on the sea bottom. Satellite positioning gives Marco an exact picture of where he's placing the mattress, and accuracy counts. Each mattress has to butt up precisely beside the one that's already been laid. There's more than 10 tons of tension dragging on these ropes. And there's tension in the control room, too. It's bad news for Marco. His screens are telling him the mattress drum is out by a full meter. This maneuver is testing his expertise.
Se si appoggia nel senso sbagliato mentre viene srotolato, il materasso invece di andare dritto sulla sua posizione gira lateralmente e quindi crea delle curve che non vanno bene, perché creano dei buchi che non devono esserci sul fondo del mare.
Marco will have to roll it up and start all over again. But now there's another crisis. Marco suspects one of the ocean-going freighters has accidentally knocked out his GPS. And the tide is about to turn again. Franco Damiani plays troubleshooter. He heads back to shore to reset the connection.
Now we'll try to start again.
The system is good to go, and Marco is back in business. Now, all that's needed is the final visual check from the diver.
Qui sono 10 centimetri.
Marco's mattress lines up perfectly. An underwater success story. If only the same were true above ground. It's autumn in Venice. As usual, the city is full of tourists. But the people who live here are getting ready for the rainy season. The raised walkways, called passerella, are always on standby. This is the time of year when extra high tides bring the very real danger of massive floods. Venice is a prisoner of the sea that surrounds it. Even dead guys can't keep their heads above water in this town. 8 former Venetian rulers are buried here, in the 10th century crypt that lies under the church of San Zaccaria. The crypt is flooded year-round. It makes for a watery grave. Then again, no Venetian can rest in peace until the Mosa project is completed. Back at the Lido site, Giulio Del Poli and his crew are much further ahead in construction than the other 2 sites. Today, they're ready to construct underwater pillars. The pillars are critical supports for the 78 floodgates that will lie on the ocean floor. The pillars are formed using a jet grouting process. Workers will inject a high-strength grout 23 meters into the seabed at high velocity. But before they can start the jet grouting, they have to drill a borehole. It takes brute force to check that the seabed has been perforated all the way down. Then the workers set up the jet grouting machine. They assemble and position the steel pipe that will be filled with the grout to form one of the pillars. This mighty machine is a prototype, and Giulio is crossing his fingers there are no glitches.
Questa attrezzatura è un'attrezzatura che è nata per lavorare sulla terraferma. Noi la stiamo utilizzando in acqua. Questo significa risolvere alcuni problemi che in terraferma non ci sono.
There are 1,000 pillars to build, and it's painstaking work just to pull off 5 each day.
Quando cominciamo? Cominceremo fra una perforazione sul giudizio
Giulio's crew fires up the jet grouter, moving this nozzle into place inside the steel form. They're about to force over 25,000 liters of grout through this hose. It takes an incredible 400 bars of pressure to do the job. They've finally worked out all the bugs with the jet grouting prototype. And just in time, Big Boss Maria Teresa Broto has arrived for a site inspection.
Ottimo lavoro. Insomma, sei nel rispetto dei tempi, anzi forse hai guadagnato.
Guadagnare
non hai ritardi, però non hai ritardi che insomma
è sempre una parola grossa.
È un bel risultato.
Teniamoceli fino all'ultimo.
Over at the Chioggia worksite, engineers face a special equipment challenge with the soft clay seabed. They've got one of the tallest cranes in the Mediterranean that's up to the job. But in July, its pile driver went haywire, breaking a critical attachment. Now it's time to see if a new part has fixed the problem. Remember Sergio Molati, the guy who was trying to solve this hassle during the summer? Well, Sergio found a new job in Brazil. That's where this guy comes in. Massimo Paganelli, engineer for 18 years. Now it's up to Massimo and his guys to get this beast running. They've got over 1,500 piles to hammer 43 meters into the seabed. The first tricky bit of business is getting the piling into position. This move is similar to threading a 1.5-ton needle. It's down, but does it line up perfectly? Close enough doesn't count on a $5.5 billion project. And they can't afford to waste any more time. Massimo's crew never knows when the weather will throw a wrench into the works.
A seconda delle condizioni meteo marine, se sono particolarmente avverse e le oscillazioni del pontone sono notevoli e si decide di sospendere la lavorazione sia per condizioni meteo marine avverse sia per ovviamente condizioni di pioggia battente.
Now the pile driver and its brand new attachment are hoisted into place. The crucial test is when they power up. They're good to go. They're back on track with the giant crane. But the question is, for how long? The forecast calls for high tides and heavy rain. The heaviest they've seen in a long time. The people people of Venice are bracing themselves. Heavy autumn rains have begun. Already, small floods have rushed over the jetties and sidewalks of the lowest-lying neighborhoods. Upping the ante, weather charts are forecasting higher than usual tides for Venice at the end of November. Praying for sunshine, Dr. Maria Teresa Broto, Chief Design Engineer of the MOSA project.
We hope to have no storms. We should keep our fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, because at this point in construction, the massive MOSA floodgates won't be ready to work for another 5 years. Over at the Malamaco job site, Hercules the tug is pulling the mighty load. For 11 long days, Hercules has been en route from southern Italy, battling heavy seas and strong currents to ferry this concrete block to its final resting place. This cement block is also called a caisson, similar to the huge ones which will eventually anchor the MOSA floodgates. But the real caissons will be 4 times as big as this, at a mere 5,000 tons. This is just a baby version, a kind of Lego building block. It's going to be sunk here as part of a platform to hold a mechanical lift. The chief troubleshooter here is maritime engineer Enrico Pellegrini. He comes from a family of engineers, and he's worked on big international projects for 18 years. But Enrico's learned to pay special attention to the weather on the MOSA project.
And when we get the high tides, we have to stop the work because it could be dangerous. Also, when some storm is coming in and wind and waves, it could be very dangerous if you don't plan properly your activities. Il rimorchiatore a ruote lo tira, gli altri lo spingono e deve entrare dentro.
The boss, Maria Teresa Broto, is on hand to observe the arrival of the caisson. It's a critical moment for Enrico as his crew battles with the current.
Yes. Yeah, there is some problem on the tug.
The powerful current is dragging the caisson away from the tug.
Yeah. The current. Yeah. The caisson is moving all the way on the side. So they are trying to pull it now with the tug.
It isn't working well, perhaps.
Yeah, they're pulling on the right, because it was going all the way on the left. I don't know why. Maybe some current. Yeah. Look at that now. Wow, let's go. Okay.
It was a close call, but the caisson is now headed in the right direction. That's where Maria Teresa hopes the entire project is heading.
Well, it's very exciting for me watching it and see that finally it's ready for starting its technical life. It is ready for the final part of construction phase of Mobile Gate.
Today, the sun is beaming down on the MOSA project. But somewhere, out over the Adriatic on this December day, the forces of nature are brewing up a perfect storm. It's a code red for Venice. The siren sounds at daybreak, followed by escalating tones that warn the city of the worst possible kind of high tide. People hurry along the passerella, the temporary walkways that usually stand above the floodwaters. There's no time to waste. The waters are already rising. Storefronts and cafes are flooding swiftly. And in a short 2 hours, the tide will reach its maximum height. And it's about to get much, much worse. The wind has shifted. A warm scirocco from the southeast is now blowing into Venice. Combine that wind with an exceptional high tide and a late autumn storm, and what unfolds is the worst flood in more than 20 years. Amidst the chaos, engineer Enrico Pellegrini is trying to make his way to the Mosa worksite. He's worried about the unfinished task his team hope to complete today.
The cases we have placed today, they are completely underwater, and so all the machinery we have put on top of it also, and I hope they are not damaged by the flood.
But it's way too dangerous for any boat to venture out from the lagoon. Enrico is trapped by the rising waters, just like thousands of other people. The tide moves faster and reaches higher than anyone could predict. It's exactly the kind of situation that the Mosa project is designed to prevent. But today, Enrico is helpless. He decides he has to see the devastation up close.
I've never seen something like this. Unbelievable. Look at that. Water inside houses.
This sculptor is hip deep in the floodwaters that have invaded his workshop.
Sarebbe una bella cosa farlo questo Mose.
Devono farlo. Se c'è tanta acqua alta, si sprofonda, si vede tutto, dobbiamo trovare una soluzione come il Mose. Sono 1 metro sotto. 1 metro lontano. Si vergognano invece. Che si deve fare questa opera qua.
He said we have to do the Mose, we have to do the Mose. Do it. Because I'm 1 meter underwater. I told him, we're trying. My God. Yeah, he's right. We have to do it.
Enrico is now even more determined to keep the Mosa project on track. It's an event for the record books. Venice has just survived its worst flooding in more than 2 decades. In one day, the high waters reached a whopping 1.6 meters above sea level. Now, the people of Venice are trying to come to terms with the damage. How much more can this fragile city take? If the Mosa project were up and running, its massive floodgates would have risen from the water to hold back the record high tide. But those barriers won't be ready for several more years. There's still a lot of work to be done just to prepare the underwater structures to contain the gates. Enrico finally makes his way to the Malamocco worksite. He and his crew are playing catch-up and clean-up after the big flood. Even here they haven't escaped the effects of yesterday's Acqua Alta.
The wind was so strong that there were a lot of waves produced inside the basin.
Although it may look like they're walking on water, these workers are actually standing on top of a concrete building block caisson. Another block is due to arrive any day now, and this barge is supposed to secure the seabed so it can support it. But once more, the tide is rising and posing a big risk.
The tide has already reached the level of the structure and we have to move the barge, otherwise there is a risk that the barge goes on top of the structure and we're making some damages.
Luckily today, no one is predicting an extreme high tide. Still, the sea and the weather are hampering construction for a second day. The crew can't continue working on the seabed, so they'll have to shift gears. But at least mundane, routine tasks like these move the project one step closer to completion. Yesterday's flood was a real wake-up call for everyone.
Being there and couldn't do anything, I mean, it was very frustrating. So what I thought is, oh God, we have to do this job and we have to try to do it as quickly as possible. Because we don't want to have another thing like that, I think.
Enrico and the boss, Dr. Maria Teresa Broto, are even more determined that the MOSA project will eventually save Venice.
I knew already that this was a very important project. That is why also I'm very happy to be in it. And this makes me feel proud of it, of course, as well.
This is the important goal of our solution. We'll solve all the problems of rainwater, including the exceptional ones. So Venice will be dry, no more floodings.
The MOSA project isn't just the ultimate engineering challenge. It's the ultimate gamble for Venice, which is running out of time. In the fight over this magnificent city, man versus nature, it will be winner take all.